Good morning, good afternoon to all the attendees. Welcome to BB Dev Days. I'm Jason Metcalf. I'm a principal solution architect at Blackbaud, and I'm really excited. We have a fantastic session today with our friends from Georgia Tech University as Foundation, as well as Microsoft. Just one moment of housekeeping. After the session today, we'll have a very brief survey that just to remind you all, stick around for it, and we value your feedback. But we won't waste any more time. We're excited to bring on the speakers, and we're going to start with my good colleague, good friend, Jim. Over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Ballou. I am a Copilot solution specialist with Microsoft Tech for Social Impact. I have a couple of slides to share, just to kind of set the stage, and then we're going to hand it over to our friends from Georgia Tech Foundation. So a little bit about me. You may know me from my previous existence. I worked at Blackbaud with Jason and the rest of the folks for over almost 3 decades. So it's great to be back here. Really excited to be talking to you today. I do have a couple of slides here. First of all, why are we doing this? Microsoft's mission is to empower every person and every organization on this planet to achieve more. How do we do that? With technology. So what I wanted to do, just very briefly, is talk a little bit about what Copilot is and what Microsoft is doing with this. And then Carrie and Manny from Georgia Tech will talk about how they're taking that technology and doing some really cool and innovative things. So Copilot is generative AI. It is built on the architecture that Microsoft and OpenAI have developed over the years. What we are looking at today is an implementation of generative AI using Copilot as a user interface. Copilot, we like to say, is the UI for AI. And then using a tool called Copilot Studio, which is freely available to all of you, you can build agents. And agents are the gremlins behind the scene that interact with the data that you need. Now, what does that look like? This is kind of an operating model of how data moves in generative AI. And there's going to be no test on this later on, but it's important to understand that what we're really talking about here is using generative AI and then grounding it in specific data. So Microsoft Copilot can be grounded in your Microsoft Office data. Your Microsoft Graph is what that's called. Your emails, your chats, your OneDrive, your SharePoint, things like that. What we're talking about in this solution with Georgia Tech Foundation is adding more knowledge to Copilot. So it's not just grounded in your work data, it's grounded in your CRM. Now, there are a number of tools that Microsoft has put forth to help with this. They're on the screen here. We're going to focus a little bit on Copilot Studio today, but if you look at this kind of scaling from very simple implementation, web-grounded chat, to Azure AI Studio for, pro code development of generative AI, Microsoft has a complete set of tools for you. My last slide promise here is that there are a bunch of resources on the Microsoft Tech for Social Impact site. If you go to Microsoft.com/nonprofits, you'll be presented with a wealth of information, and we'll share these links at the end of the session so that you can go and do your own investigations. All right. With that, I am very pleased to introduce Carrie from the Georgia Tech Foundation.
Thanks, Jim. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. We're so excited to be here presenting at BB Dev Days with you to go over just some of the exploration work we've done with Copilot Studio and CRM integration. Manny, do you want to come and introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Manny. I'm a UI UX developer here at the Georgia Tech Foundation, and I worked with Carrie on this project.
And Manny's been integral in creating a lot of our topics with our Power Automate flows, and I've really appreciated all the work that he's done in this exploration of using Copilot Studio. And so today we're going to talk a lot about, how to connect Sky APIs and data to your Copilot Studio. So regardless of whether you're a CRM developer or you on CRM, you should be able to get something from this presentation. If you have access to your data and access to a Sky API endpoint, then this would apply to you as well. So last year in BB Dev Days, I was really inspired by all the different presentations and the uses of Sky API, as well as the presentations on Copilot Studio. And I thought I would apply for one of the innovation grants around increasing the quality of contact reports by integrating BBCRM and Copilot Studio. I saw that Copilot Studio could be published to Teams. And I know that I'm on Teams all day, every day, communicating with my team. And I also have it on my phone. And I know that it's a great way to sort of be in communication when you're not at your desk. Could easily translate into something development officers could use as they're on the go, meeting with prospects, going to lunches, events. They could easily just pull up Teams, and they would be able to just type out a contact report or communicate with CRM using a Copilot Studio agent. So that was the idea behind a lot of this. But you'll see from this presentation that we didn't stick to that idea. We went down a lot of rabbit holes and explored a lot of different things. So Jim briefly went over what is Copilot Studio. It's a tool for creating intelligent agents that are tailored specifically to your business needs. It uses knowledge, which structured data and documents that can provide accurate answers. And it's also made up of topics that you can set to deliver results from prompts. And then this enables integrations with external systems. So whether it's a website, Teams, there's numerous ways you can share an agent. So let's go through how we set up some of our knowledge. When we started to build the agent, we realized that there was a lot more that we wanted it to do besides just creating contact reports. We also knew that end users would need to be able to give us more information than just the contact report. For instance, we would need to know what prospect they wanted to create the contact report for. Most development officers don't have the lookup IDs of all of their prospects memorized. So to do this, we know we needed to bring in some knowledge sources that they could query, whether that was Sky API calls. And then when we were looking at the knowledge sources available, we were really excited to see that there was an Azure SQL connection. Since we're hosted by Blackbaud, we thought, oh, well, we'll just, put in our connection string. We'll be just connected up to our data warehouse, our BBDW, using that Azure SQL connection. However, when we got into it and started to create the connection, we found that there wasn't the ability to encrypt that connection. So you can see on this slide that we kept getting this trigger execution error, which is what happens when you can't encrypt a connection to BBDW or the Blackbaud Azure SQL. So we decided to pivot. We already had another member of our team that had been working a lot in Fabric and exploring what could be done there. So he said, well, why don't we just create a lakehouse and you can pull in maybe just some prospect data and we can see if we can get that connected. So I chose some of the BBDW tables that I thought, were great for prospect information. And I told him what those were and he sucked all of those into this lakehouse. And then he gave me access to the lakehouse and I was able to then create it as a knowledge source on this Copilot Studio agent. We also had another member of our team who creates all of our training and documentation for CRM, and she has created hundreds of how-to articles on Freshdesk, which is our help desk platform. And Freshdesk is set up so that we just have one URL, and within all of those URLs, we have it all grouped, and it should just easily able to, follow those URLs to get all of the knowledge that we have stored there. However, as we were testing our prompts for our sort of how-to questions, we noticed that it wasn't really coming back with the knowledge that we had given it. So after some research, I learned that Copilot Studio will really only go down 2 levels, and our Fresh Desk articles were about 4 levels deep. However, she had already created a lot of Word docs and had put them into a SharePoint directory. So we pivoted again and we just added a knowledge source of SharePoint, and Copilot Studio was able to use that as knowledge. So this is a little view into the lake house that we put together. Over on the right, you can see a lot of the BBDW tables that we brought in, and then that lake house is in the middle. And from those tables, I was able to create an opportunity view that flattened that data even more, where I could, assign the prospect manager to the opportunity and the prospect. And I also gave the column names. I made them just a bit more descriptive about what they were actually going to share. So again, we had 2 main data sources. We had the Azure SQL, which was pulling in that opportunities view. And within the description of that particular knowledge source, I wanted to tell Copilot Studio, look, you need to look here to get quantitative answers. So anything that, if somebody is asking how many or how much, this would be the best knowledge source for you to look in. And then with the SharePoint documents for that knowledge source, I wanted Copilot Studio to understand more that would be more descriptive. That should answer questions more like, how do I do this? Where do I find this? So I put those in the descriptions of the knowledge sources. So the next thing that Copilot Studio is made up of is topics. And this is how we tackled some of the topics that we created. We used Sky API actions to help answer some prompts that would be like search for a prospect or enter a contact report. These topics have logic that are based on the prompts from the user that calls the actions, and these are Power Automate flows. These Power Automate flows make the Sky API calls and then return data based on the endpoints and the input values that are passed into them. And so also, by the way, Manny has a session on Thursday at 4 p.m. that you should check out if you're interested more on how to authenticate with these Sky API in Power Automate. He'll walk through user logins and how we refresh our tokens and manage our access tokens so that we can seamlessly just make these Power Automate calls without the end user having to log in. So here on this slide, you can see that there is a flow that's called and passed parameters that have been collected via prompts. And then that flow calls the constituent search endpoint from Sky API. So in this particular case, since the constituent search, there's going to be multiple results that come back most likely. And so we present an adaptive card so that the end user can make a choice as to which constituent they want to move forward with the rest of their prompts. Once they make this choice, then we save that GUID or their ID that came back in that call, and we save it in a global variable within the actual Copilot agent. This allows us to then use that constituent record to make subsequent calls. One thing that we found when creating these topics, especially with these Sky API endpoints where we're trying to sort of recreate CRM logic, is that it did become a little tedious. There were a lot of if-then statements, and just a lot of data that needed to come back and forth with prompts and requests from the end user. However, we were able to create a seamless data flow between the two, between Copilot and Blackbaud CRM using Sky API and Power Automate. And since we started work on this project, Blackbaud released their first connector to CRM, which was the constituent connector, which is very exciting. So it actually takes the need for Power Automate out of this whole equation, in that we can actually hook topics straight up to actions from Blackbaud using that connector, which makes it super easy. So one thing that we realized is that we wanted to use adaptive cards as much as possible when interacting with end users in these prompts. With adaptive cards, we can collect a whole lot of information all at once, and then pass that over to the Sky API endpoint. So, for instance, in this slide, you can see on the right-hand side, I am going back and forth with the end user a lot to get information to create a contact report. Whereas on the left-hand side, I'm able to gather all of that information in one request and then pass it over to the Sky API endpoint. This makes it a lot less frustrating for the end user who's trying to work with this particular agent. The other nice thing about using these adaptive cards is that we have, you can place buttons at the bottom, which really helps the user to sort of lead them along the process of what they want to do. There's a natural workflow with creating a contact report, and by having these buttons in place, we can lead that user along that path more easily without having to decipher what their prompts are. The other nice thing about using adaptive cards, especially when something like a contact report, is you can have the drop downs there. So an end user, they don't have to remember every contact method that they could choose for a contact report. So one of the neatest things, though, I think in this process was actually using that opportunities view that we pulled in as a knowledge source. Within Copilot Studio, one of the system topics is called conversational boosting. And from my understanding, this topic is really used as a catch-all when Copilot doesn't really understand what topic to match the prompt to. It tries to figure it out on its own. So we added both of our data knowledge sources to this particular topic. You can actually choose which data sources you want this conversational boosting to use. So we played around with this with the opportunity view that I had created. And in that opportunity view, to give you an idea of what's in there, it's all the opportunity data in that view. So it's amounts, it's the prospect manager that's assigned to that opportunity, it's the prospect assigned to that opportunity. So I would ask Copilot Studio questions like, how many opportunities are in a canceled status? And it would give me a number. So then I would go over to the lakehouse and I would query the lakehouse to make sure that was the number that was right. And it was. We did a lot of trust then verify with these questions against this opportunity view. And then on this particular slide are just a couple of the more interesting interactions that I've had with that opportunity view. The first one on the bottom right, I had been questioning Copilot Studio about a particular development officer. And then I asked it, so how many opportunities are in awaiting documentation status? And Copilot responded with the number for that particular development officer. And so then I would just ask, well, how many for everyone? And then it gave me the response for everyone. And then one of the other interesting interactions I had with it was on the top left. You can see that I asked Copilot Studio, like, what is the biggest amount that one of our development officers plans to close? And Copilot responded with 10 million. And I thought this was interesting because at first glance, when I went over to verify, I looked at that opportunities for that particular development officer, and I thought Copilot had actually gotten it wrong because I saw 25 million. However, that was the expected ask amount, not the expected close amount. And my question had been, what do they plan to close? And so that's when, to me, even though I've been in Chat GPT, and I mean, I understand what generative AI is, but it really starts to feel like magic when it's using your own data to answer these questions. And you can have meaningful discussions with a Copilot about the opportunity pipeline, and it really would help non-technical decision makers to query data in real time on their own. So while we currently only have this opportunity view as a knowledge source, we could really, the sky's the limit for what you could open this up. I mean, if you had last visit dates or birthdays or addresses, you could potentially plan trips, find out who to visit next, see who gave the biggest gift last month, and you can do this all in Teams. So what's next? So we would like to really pinpoint the data that would be most meaningful to end users. CRM's huge. There's tons of data in it, but we can't expose it all in Copilot Studio. So some initial thoughts would be, maybe around interactions or contact reports, maybe primary contact information. Also, what topics would be most useful? What do people want to interact if they want to push data, or if they just want to, get certain information back, which topics would be the most useful? So, we're in the stages of drafting a survey out to all of our development officers to collect their feedback to understand how this could be the most helpful tool for them. After that, we would probably release it to an initial group of development officers as beta testers. And that would also allow us to really jump into this, to the activity and analytics part of Copilot Studio, which we haven't been able to yet. I know every interaction that I have with it at the end, when I say quit and it says goodbye, it gives me a rating and I can rate my interaction. So I think that would be really neat to, start collecting a lot of that. So with that, I was going to jump in, if I can, and share what our Copilot looks like. So let me see if I can find how to share that. Yeah. So this is our agent that we've created. Our version of CRM, we brand it BB Gold. So this is our BB Gold Copilot. And as you can see, when I load it, it goes ahead and it's testing itself. And one thing that we do is when our agent loads, there's a Sky API call that is made that uses my email address tied to Teams, and it finds me within CRM and asks me to verify myself. So, I'll say, yes, this is me. But let's jump over into our knowledge. So here you can see our two knowledge sources. This is our opportunity knowledge source, and this is the connection to the Lakehouse and Fabric. And one thing that I did want to point out here is that I think it's really helpful when you're trying to improve your generative answers, is that to come over here and use these column names, synonyms, and descriptions to really give your columns a lot more information for Copilot to use. So here you can see, I have all these columns. I'm sorry, my screen is small. And I can, just give a better description of what each of these columns do. And then you can also add a glossary. I haven't done that yet. And then here are the topics. And then I was just going to show how easy it is to set up a new connection to the new CRM connector. So this particular topic I just created quickly this morning, and hopefully this will work. I added a new trigger and I said, I want this particular topic to just list the attributes for a constituent. And so I set up this connector. I just created a new action off of this topic that links straight to this Blackbaud CRM connector, and it's the one for list attributes. And what it's passing is whenever I said, yes, this is me here, it stored my GUID in this global user ID variable. And so now whenever I call this topic, it uses this to call out to this connector and will give me my output of all of my attributes. So let me just add here, well, there's this gold cast, there it goes. So if I add here, I can say I want to send a message back, and I want to use the output of the list attributes. And I'll save this. And then I'm going to ask Copilot to list attributes. I'll ask it again. And there it listed, this isn't pretty, it's all the JSON that was returned. You would need a nice adaptive card or something to make this look better, but you can see here my attribute of birth nation, the high school I went to. And so it's really very easy to set this up to connect to CRM to pull constituent data. But thank you, everyone. I don't know if there are any questions. I think there's a few more minutes that we could try to answer them.
Well, while people are coming up with questions, Carrie, I just want to say congratulations. This is exactly what I want this technology to be doing. Having worked at Blackbaud for a long time, and now I'm working at Microsoft, and seeing how this technology is capable of helping people do their jobs. My vision, frankly, is I can't wait to be on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise when I say, "Hey, BB Gold, who do I need to call today?" Or "How much did my donor give last week?" And just have a conversation with my data, regardless of what CRM you're in. Of course, we know you're using Blackbaud CRM and all, there's lots of other things out there. But one thing I did want to also point everyone's attention to, if you want to see what is coming next from Microsoft, we just last month had a session called Build. It was 3 days of really deep dives into new technologies, and a lot of it was dealing with Copilot. 2 terms that I want you to take away from that is Copilot tuning and grounding in CRMs. So we've actually built some more features since Carrie and her team started working on this project to help make this process easier and to help Blackbaud present more generative AI and hopefully Copilot technology to all of you.
Thanks, Jim.
So Carrie and Manny, it sounds like you're early days into this. Have you had any initial feedback from beta testers or business users that are interacting with some of what you're building?
We haven't had the opportunity to roll it out to them yet. We've done some demos, and they've seemed very excited about it. We have more work to do on our side as far as the data in Fabric itself, and getting that pipeline automatically refreshing, and then learning probably how Copilot refreshes itself with its new knowledge as new data comes into that Fabric instance.
Fantastic. Well, it doesn't look like there are any questions. Also, just echo Jim's comments. Thank you. This is so exciting and really looks to be next generation stuff in in how you're bringing great technology to fundraisers and the work they do. So congratulations, and we're eager to hear what kind of feedback you get from the business as you move forward.
Thank you.
Just for the attendees, a reminder: I will launch the survey. Please fill in and provide the feedback. We value your feedback and definitely use it as we look for exciting topics like the Georgia Tech Foundation story here and Carrie and Manny's review of it. So thank you all. Thank you, Jim, for joining us. We appreciate you, and keep on making some of this exciting next generation technology serve the fundraising business ahead.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.